"I'm taking you to my room," says the mafia boss to the waitress who was hiding under his table. The sounds of La Sirena were a chaotic symphony that Maya Collins had memorized, note for note. There was the clatter of silver forks against fine china, the low hum of conversation rising from 50 different tables, and the sharp hiss of the espresso machine behind the bar. To anyone else, it was the sound of a Friday night in Riverton, vibrant and alive. To Maya, it sounded like exhaustion. She adjusted the heavy tray balanced on her left shoulder, feeling the familiar burn in her deltoid muscle. Her feet, encased in sensible black non-slip shoes that had seen better days, throbbed in a rhythm that matched the bass of the jazz music drifting through the speakers. She forced the corners of her mouth upward into a polite, service industry smile as she navigated the narrow gaps between the tables, dodging the elbows of patrons who had enjoyed too much Chianti. "Excuse me, sir," Maya said softly, sliding a plate of osso buco onto a pristine white tablecloth. She moved with a practiced efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere. Her hand drifted instinctively to the pocket of her apron, her fingers brushing against the cold, cracked screen of her cheap smartphone. She did not dare pull it out on the floor, but the need to check it was a physical itch. Eli should have been home from school for 3 hours now. He had promised to text her when he finished his homework, but the phone had remained silent since her shift began. Beside the phone, folded into a tight square, was a final notice from the electric company. It was a tangible weight against her hip, heavier than the tray she carried. $300 by Tuesday, or the lights would go out. Again. Maya slipped back toward the kitchen, pushing through the swinging double doors. The noise shifted instantly from the polished din of the dining room to the harsh, frantic clamor of the back of house. Chefs shouted orders in a mix of Italian and English. Pans seared with aggressive hisses, and the dishwasher groaned under the load of dirty plates. Table 4 needs water, and Table 7 is asking for the wine list. The floor manager snapped as he walked past her, barely looking up from his clipboard. "I am on it," Maya said, her voice tight. She moved to the water station, filling a pitcher with ice. Beside her, Elena, a server who had worked at La Sirena for 5 years and knew every shadow in the building, leaned in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper, cutting through the kitchen noise. "You better look sharp." "Maya, we just got the call. The king is coming in tonight." Maya paused, the ice scoop hovering in midair. She did not have to ask who Elena meant. In Riverton, there were politicians, there were police captains, and then there was the Rinaldi family. They owned half the city, and rumor had it they owned the people who ran the other half. La Sirena was officially owned by a holding company, but everyone who worked there knew it was a Rinaldi front. The polished dining room upstairs was for the public. The back rooms, the ones down the hall past the wine cellar, were for business. "Dante Rinaldi?" Maya asked, keeping her voice low. Elena nodded, her eyes wide. "He's bringing his crew. Mr. Rossi is practically vibrating. Just remember the rules. Do not hover, do not interrupt, and if he looks at you, do not look back too long." Maya felt a cold prickle of unease run down her spine. She had seen Dante Rinaldi only once before, from a distance. He had walked through the dining room like a storm front, the air pressure seeming to drop around him. He was terrifying, not because he shouted or made a scene, but because he didn't have to. "I will keep my head down," Maya promised. "I just need to get through this shift and get home to Eli." She grabbed the water pitcher and pushed back out into the dining room. The atmosphere had already changed. The casual chatter of the guests seemed quieter, more subdued, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The front doors opened and a hush rippled through the space. Dante Rinaldi walked in. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered and wearing a charcoal suit that likely cost more than Maya made in a year. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was handsome in a severe, unforgiving way. His eyes were the color of cold espresso, scanning the room with a precision that missed nothing. He did not look like a man coming for dinner. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. Flanking him were 4 men. Maya noticed the details that most customers missed. She noticed that they did not look at the menu or the decor. They looked at the exits. They looked at the kitchen doors. They looked at the hands of the other patrons. One of them, a stocky man with a scar running through his eyebrow, adjusted his jacket, and the fabric pulled tight against something heavy and solid at his waist. Mr. Rossi, the manager, scurried forward, bowing slightly. Mr. Rinaldi, your usual table is ready. Dante did not speak. He simply nodded and followed the manager toward the best table in the house, a secluded booth in the corner that offered a clear view of the entire room while protecting his back against the wall. Maya tried to make herself invisible, attending to a couple near the window, but she felt the gravity of the Rinaldi table pulling at the entire room. Maya, Mr. Rossi hissed, appearing at her elbow a moment later. Take table 1. Me? Maya's heart skipped a beat. Why not Elena? She is the senior server. Elena is shaking so bad she dropped a fork. Rossi snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. You are steady. Just go over there. Take the drink order and leave. Do not mess this up. Maya took a deep breath, smoothing her apron over her uniform. She could do this. It was just a table. He was just a customer. She walked toward the corner booth, her hands gripping the small notepad so tightly her knuckles turned white. As she approached, the conversation at the table died instantly. The 4 bodyguards sat facing outward, creating a perimeter. Dante sat in the center, his posture relaxed but alert. Good evening, gentlemen, Maya said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Can I start you off with something to drink? The bodyguards ignored her, their eyes still darting around the room. Dante turned his gaze toward her, up close. The intensity of his presence was overwhelming. He smelled of expensive cologne, tobacco, and something sharp, like gun oil. A bottle of the Barolo, Dante said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but carrying an edge of command that brooked no argument. And mineral water for the table. Of course, Maya said. She turned to leave, but as she pivoted, a busboy squeezed past her in the narrow aisle, bumping her elbow. The water pitcher she was holding tilted. It was a fraction of a second, a clumsy accident born of exhaustion and nerves. A splash of ice water sloshed over the rim, heading straight for the sleeve of Dante's pristine suit jacket. Maya gasped, instinctively reaching out to catch the droplets, but she was too slow. But Dante was not. His hand shot out with a speed that blurred in the dim light. He didn't pull away. He caught her wrist. His grip was firm, halting her movement instantly, stabilizing her hand before the water could do any real damage. The restaurant seemed to freeze. Maya stopped breathing. She looked down, expecting anger, expecting him to snap at her or for his guards to intervene. Instead, she found her hand suspended in his warm, rough grasp. His fingers were long and strong, wrapping completely around her slender wrist. She looked up, and her gaze collided with his. For a second, the rest of the room vanished. Dante was not looking at the water. He was looking at her. His eyes were dark and unreadable, searching her face with a curiosity that made her knees feel weak. It was not the leering look she got from some of the businessmen who came in for lunch. It was something heavier. It felt like he was reading the fine print of her soul. I am so sorry, sir, Maya stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I tripped. Dante did not let go immediately. He held her gaze for another heartbeat, his thumb brushing inadvertently against the pulse point on the inside of her wrist. He would feel how fast her heart was racing. Careful, Dante said softly. The anger she expected was absent instead. His tone was calm, almost grounding. He released her hand slowly, the absence of his touch leaving a strange, tingling ghost sensation on her skin. Maya took a step back, clutching the pitcher to her chest. I will get that wine right away, she whispered. She turned and hurried toward the bar, her face burning. She could feel his eyes on her back, a physical weight tracking her movement across the room. She fumbled with the wine order, her hands shaking as she placed the glasses on a tray. Why had he looked at her like that? And why, amidst the terror, had she felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of safety when his hand was on hers? She shook her head, trying to clear the thought. He was a criminal, a dangerous man. She needed to focus on the bill in her pocket and her brother waiting at home. Maya returned to the table, moving carefully. She poured the wine. Placing the bottle in the center of the table, the men were speaking in low tones now, using phrases she couldn't quite parse, words like shipment, the North Docks, and leakage. She tried not to listen, keeping her eyes on the tablecloth. Suddenly, the front door of the restaurant burst open with a violence that made the heavy oak slam against the wall. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya looked up. 3 men stood in the entryway. They were not wearing the tailored suits of the Rinaldi crew. They wore heavy leather jackets and jeans, their faces hard and desperate. The man in the center scanned the room wild-eyed until his gaze landed on the corner booth, at Dante's table. The reaction was instantaneous. The relaxed posture of the bodyguards evaporated. Hands slid beneath jackets. The air in the restaurant turned brittle, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Maya's arm stand up. Dante did not move, but his stillness had changed. It was no longer the stillness of a statue. It was the stillness of a viper before it strikes. His eyes narrowed, sharp and predatory, locking on to the intruders. "Get down!" one of Dante's men barked, though it wasn't clear if he was talking to the table or the room at large. The man in the leather jacket raised his arm. Metal glinted under the chandeliers. "Gun!" someone screamed. The sound of the shot was deafening in the enclosed space. A vase on a nearby pedestal shattered, sending shards of ceramic and water spraying across the floor. Chaos erupted. Customers screamed and dove under tables. Chairs were overturned. The elegant order of La Sirena disintegrated into panic. Maya stood frozen for a fraction of a second, her brain unable to process the violence. Then, instinct took over. She dropped her tray, the sound of breaking wine glasses lost in the commotion, and dropped to her knees. She scrambled for the nearest cover. The nearest cover was Dante Rinaldi's table. She dove underneath the heavy linen tablecloth just as a second shot rang out, chipping the plaster on the wall above where she had been standing. Under the table, the world was dark and enclosed. The air smelled of floor polish and expensive leather shoes. Maya curled into a tight ball, wrapping her arms around her head, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her breath came in short, terrified gasps. Above her, the sounds of shouting and struggling intensified. She heard heavy boots shifting position, the scrape of chair legs against the hardwood. "Stay back," a voice roared from the entrance. "Handle it," Dante's voice came from directly above her. It was terrifyingly calm, a low rumble that vibrated through the wood of the table. "Do not let them leave." More gunfire erupted, louder this time, followed by the sickening sound of a body hitting the floor. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, clapping her hands over her ears, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She thought of Eli. If she died here, under a table in a mafia shootout, who would take care of him? Who would pay the electric bill? She shifted slightly, trying to pull her legs in further, and her shoulder brushed against something solid. She froze. She had bumped into Dante's legs. There was a pause in the movement above. The heavy combat boots near her face shifted. The shouting was moving toward the front of the restaurant now, away from the corner booth, as Dante's men engaged the attackers. Suddenly, the tablecloth next to her was lifted. Light flooded into her hiding spot. Maya flinched, looking up in terror, expecting to see the barrel of a gun. Instead, she saw Dante Rinaldi. He had leaned down from his seat, lifting the heavy fabric to look underneath. His face was shadowed, but his eyes caught the dim light from the dining room. He looked at her, curled up between his shoes, trembling but silent. Maya stared back, her chest heaving. She bit her lips so hard she tasted copper, refusing to scream, refusing to cry. She held his gaze with a desperate, terrified defiance. Dante's expression shifted. The predatory sharpness softened into something else. Amusement? Intrigue? He looked at the fear in her eyes, and then at the stubborn set of her jaw. Most people would be hysterical. She was silent. He didn't speak to his men. He didn't look at the chaos destroying the restaurant. He reached a hand down toward her. Palm open, it was an invitation. "Come here," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya hesitated for a heartbeat, looking at his hand. It was the hand of a killer. She knew that now. But the chaos outside the table felt infinite, and the space he was offering felt controlled. She reached out, placing her trembling fingers in his palm. His fingers closed around hers, warm, dry, and solid. He pulled her effortlessly out from under the table. As she scrambled to her feet, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand, he did not let go. He stood up with her, his large frame blocking her from the view of the main room. He became a human shield, placing himself between her and the violence. Dante stripped off his suit jacket in one fluid motion and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, engulfing her, smelling of him, that mix of tobacco and cologne that was suddenly the most comforting scent in the world. He pulled the lapels together, cinching the jacket tight around her, hiding her uniform, hiding her trembling. The shooting had stopped. His men were shouting orders, securing the room. The intruders were either down or gone. Dante leaned in close, his mouth brushing her ear so that only she could hear him over the aftermath of the brawl. His voice was low, intimate, and absolute. "I am taking you to my room." He didn't wait for an answer. He placed a heavy hand on the small of her back, guiding her firmly away from the carnage in the main dining room. He steered her toward a discreet side door that blended into the paneling, a door Maya had never noticed in her 2 years working there. She didn't resist. She couldn't. Her reality had shattered the moment the first shot was fired, and now the only thing holding it together was the man guiding her into the dark stairwell, away from the world she knew and straight into his. The heavy oak door clicked shut, severing the noise of the restaurant below as if someone had cut a wire. The silence in the private suite was instantaneous and profound, ringing in Maya's ears louder than the gunshots had moments before. She stood frozen near the entrance, her back pressed against the wood, clutching the lapels of Dante's oversized suit jacket. The wool was heavy and warm, retaining the heat of his body, acting as a shield against the sudden chill of the air conditioning. Her heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline that refused to slow down. The room was nothing like the chaotic kitchen or the bustling dining floor she knew. It was a sanctuary of masculine luxury. Dark mahogany paneling lined the walls, absorbing the dim light from the vintage brass lamps. A wide, leather Chesterfield sofa dominated the center of the room, facing a massive desk that looked more like a fortress than furniture. To her right, heavy velvet curtains were drawn back slightly, revealing a balcony that overlooked the glittering, indifferent skyline of Riverton. It smelled of old paper, polished wood, and the faint, lingering scent of the same cologne that clung to the jacket she was wearing. Dante Rinaldi walked past her, moving with a prowling grace that belied the violence that had just occurred downstairs. He went straight to a small wet bar in the corner. His movements were precise and controlled. There was no shaking in his hands, no rapid breathing. It was as if the shootout had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience in his schedule. "Sit," Dante said. It was not a request, but his voice lacked the terrifying edge it had carried when he was barking orders at his men. It was calm, almost weary. Maya pushed herself off the doorframe, her legs feeling like jelly. She moved toward the sofa and perched on the very edge of the leather cushion, ready to bolt if necessary. She still felt like an intruder, a waitress who had stumbled into the king's court and seen things she was not meant to see. Dante returned a moment later, holding a crystal tumbler filled with water. He extended it to her. "Drink," he said. "You are in shock." Maya took the glass, her fingers trembling so badly the ice clinked loudly against the crystal. She managed to take a small sip, the cold water shocking her throat and helping to clear the fog of panic. Dante watched her, leaning back against the edge of his desk, his arms crossed over his white dress shirt. The top button was undone, and without the jacket. He looked less like a monument and more like a man, albeit a dangerous one. His dark eyes swept over her face, analyzing, calculating. "Tell me exactly what you saw," Dante said quietly. Maya lowered the glass, her grip tightening. This was it, the interrogation. She knew enough about the Rinaldi reputation to know that the wrong answer could be fatal. "I did not see anything," Maya said, her voice shaking but her words clear. "I heard a noise. I dropped my tray. I crawled under the table. That is all." Dante tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the flicker of recognition, the knowledge of who the men were or what they had shouted. "You were under there for a long time," Dante observed. "You must have heard something. Names, numbers?" "I covered my ears." Maya lied. It was a half-truth. She had tried to cover her ears, but she had heard fragments. She had heard the desperation in the attackers' voices and the cold commands in Dante's. But she also knew that admitting she had heard negotiations would make her a liability. "I was just trying not to get shot. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed. I did not want to know anything." Dante studied her for a long silence. Maya held his gaze, forcing herself not to look away, channeling every ounce of stubbornness she possessed. She had faced eviction notices, aggressive landlords, and double shifts on zero sleep. She could face him, finally. Dante exhaled through his nose, a short, sharp sound. He pushed off the desk and walked toward her. Maya flinched instinctively, pressing back into the sofa, but he stopped 2 feet away. His eyes had dropped to her arm. "You are bleeding," he said. Maya looked down. She had not even felt it, but a jagged line of red was weeping down her forearm, staining the white cuff of her uniform blouse. There was a shard of glass, likely from the vase that had shattered when the shooting started, embedded shallowly in the skin near her elbow. "Oh," she breathed, the pain suddenly rushing in as the shock wore off. "Stay there," Dante commanded. He disappeared into a bathroom attached to the suite and returned seconds later with a white first aid kit. He sat on the coffee table in front of her, bringing his face level with hers. The proximity was sudden and overwhelming. Maya could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the straight line of his nose. "Give me your arm," he said softly. Maya hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. Dante took her wrist. His hand was large, warm, and calloused, a working man's hand wrapped in a rich man's life. He rolled up the sleeve of her blouse with surprising delicacy, his fingers brushing against the sensitive skin of her inner arm. "This might sting," he warned. He used a pair of tweezers to pluck the glass shard from her skin. Maya winced, sucking in a sharp breath through her teeth, but she did not pull away. Dante worked with a concentration that fascinated her. He was a man who commanded armies of enforcers, yet he was cleaning a waitress's cut with the focus of a surgeon. He dabbed a cotton pad soaked in antiseptic over the wound. The liquid burned, and Maya let out a small, nervous laugh to cover a gasp. "Sorry," she said. "I am not usually this jumpy. It is allowed, considering the circumstances," Dante murmured. He applied a bandage, smoothing the adhesive down with his thumb. His hand lingered on her arm for a moment longer than necessary. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Maya became hyper-aware of everything. The heat radiating from his chest, the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing, and the scent of him that filled her senses. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and confusing. She should be terrified. She was in a mafia boss's private room after a shootout, but as his thumb traced a small, unconscious circle on her skin just below the bandage, she didn't feel fear. She felt a magnetic pull, a gravity that made her want to lean forward. Dante looked up from her arm. His eyes locked onto hers, and the distance between them seemed to vanish. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there for a fraction of a second, heavy with a sudden, unspoken question. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. She felt flushed, her skin tingling where he touched her. Then, Dante pulled back. He exhaled slowly, a controlled release of breath, and stood up, breaking the spell. He tossed the used cotton pad into a bin and wiped his hands, his expression returning to a mask of composure. "You should have a scar, but it will be small," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Thank you," Maya whispered, pulling her sleeve down but missing the warmth of his hand immediately. Dante walked to the balcony doors and cracked them open, letting in a draft of cool night air. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket but didn't light one, just turned it over in his fingers. "You are tough." "Maya Collins," he said, not looking at her. "Most people would still be screaming." "I cannot afford to scream," Maya said, surprised that he knew her last name. "Screaming does not pay the rent." Dante turned back to face her, leaning against the glass door. "And that is what drives you? The rent?" Maya smoothed the fabric of his jacket over her lap. "That, and my brother, Eli. He's 16. Our dad passed away 2 years ago, left us with a mountain of debt and a house that is falling apart. If I scream, I lose my job. If I lose my job, Eli loses his home. So I do not scream." Dante watched her, a newfound respect softening the hard angles of his face. He nodded slowly. "Family," he said. "It is the only thing that matters." "You have family?" Maya asked, emboldened by the quiet intimacy of the moment. Dante gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Too much family. But I was raised by my grandmother, Nonna Rosa. She was 5 feet tall and terrifying. She used to hit me with a wooden spoon if I did not finish my pasta, and she would have skinned me alive if she saw me let a lady bleed without helping her." Maya smiled, a genuine, small smile that reached her eyes. It was hard to imagine the feared Dante Rinaldi running from a woman with a wooden spoon. "She sounds nice," Maya said. "She was formidable," Dante corrected, a ghost of a smile touching his own lips. "She taught me that you do what you have to do to protect yours, no matter what the cost." He walked over to a vintage turntable set up on a credenza near the bookshelf. He flipped a switch, and the soft crackle of a needle hitting vinyl filled the room, followed by the soulful, melancholic notes of a saxophone. "Coltrane?" Maya asked, recognizing the tune. Dante looked at her in surprise. "You know jazz? My dad loved it," Maya said, her voice softening with memory. "He said digital music had no soul. He liked the scratches. He said it proved the music was real, that it had been lived in. He was a smart man," Dante said. He watched the record spin, his expression unguarded for the first time. "I hate the quiet, but I hate noise. This is the middle ground. It is organized chaos, like life." Maya stood up, feeling a sudden need to bridge the physical distance between them. She walked toward the balcony where he stood, clutching his jacket closer. The adrenaline had faded into a bone-deep exhaustion, but the tension between them was keeping her upright. She stopped next to him, looking out at the city lights. They stood in silence for a long moment, the music wrapping around them. It felt like they were the only two people in the world, suspended high above the violence and the debts and the expectations. Dante turned to her. He was close. So close she could feel the heat radiating from him. He reached out, his hand moving slowly, giving her every chance to back away. When she didn't, he gently tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone, a touch so light it made her shiver. "You should not be here, Maya," Dante murmured, his voice low and gritty. "In this room. With me. It is not safe." "I do not feel unsafe," Maya admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at him, her lips parted, her heart pounding a new rhythm. It was a reckless confession, but in that moment, it was the truth. Dante's eyes darkened. His gaze searched hers, intense and conflicted. His hand lingered near her face, his thumb hovering near the line of her jaw. He leaned in, just an inch, the magnetic pull becoming irresistible. Maya found herself leaning up, drawn to the danger, drawn to the man who had shielded her with his own body. Bam, bam, bam. A heavy, urgent knocking at the door shattered the moment like glass. Dante froze. The tenderness vanished from his face instantly, replaced by a mask of cold iron. He pulled his hand away and stepped back, the distance between them suddenly a chasm. "Enter," Dante called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. The door swung open, and Marco, the stocky man with the scar whom Maya had seen downstairs, barged in. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened, a smear of soot on his cheek. He stopped short when he saw Maya standing by the balcony, wearing the boss's jacket. Marco's eyes narrowed, flickering between Dante and Maya with open suspicion. "Boss," he said, his voice grim. "We secured the perimeter. The cops are 5 minutes out. We need to clear the floor. Why is the girl still here? Dante walked back to his desk, sitting on the edge of it, reclaiming his position of power. She fainted during the commotion. Dante lied smoothly. His voice was bored, dismissive. I brought her up here to recover. The last thing we need is a negligence lawsuit from a civilian because she hit her head in my restaurant. Maya felt a sting of hurt at the casual lie, even though she knew it was necessary. It reduced their shared moment, the tenderness, to a cold business calculation. Marco grunted, clearly skeptical, but knowing better than to question Dante in front of a witness. Fine, but we need to move. Vince's guys are gone, but they will be back. Get the car around back, Dante ordered. Have Paolo drive her home. Paolo? Marco scoffed. For a waitress? Do it, Marco, Dante said. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marco nodded once, threw a last glare at Maya, and retreated, closing the door. Dante turned back to Maya. The vulnerability was gone, hidden behind the walls he had rebuilt in the blink of an eye. You need to go, he said. Before the police start taking statements, it is better if your name is not on any report tonight. Maya nodded, feeling foolish for the disappointment settling in her chest. She took off the jacket, shivering as the cool air hit her arms, and handed it back to him. Thank you, she said stiffly, for the water and the bandage. Keep it, Dante said, nodding at the jacket. It is cold outside. He walked her to the private elevator that led to the alleyway, bypassing the chaos of the main floor. The ride down was silent. When the black sedan pulled up to the curb of her apartment building 20 minutes later, Maya felt a wave of embarrassment. The streetlights here were broken, casting the peeling paint of her building in gloomy shadows. Garbage cans overflowed on the sidewalk, and a group of men stood on the corner, eyeing the expensive car with predatory interest. It was a stark contrast to the velvet and mahogany of Dante's suite. This was her reality. Dante, sitting in the back seat beside her, looked out the window. He didn't sneer. He didn't look disgusted. He looked intense. His eyes scanned the broken buzzer system at the front door, the lack of security cameras, the dark vestibule. This is it? He asked. Yes, Maya said, her hand on the door handle. It is not much, but it is home. Dante looked up toward the third floor. In the window, a silhouette was visible, a teenage boy, peering out through the blinds, watching the strange car. Eli, is that him? Dante asked. The brother. Maya nodded. He worries when I am late. Dante felt a strange, twisting sensation in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a fierce, protective urge that had nothing to do with business. He looked at the flimsy front door of her building and then back at Maya, who looked small and fragile against the backdrop of the rough neighborhood. Maya opened the door to get out, but she paused. She turned back to him. Thank you for getting me home safe, she said. Dante leaned forward. He reached out, and for a second Maya thought he was going to pull away. Instead, he brought his hand up and brushed his thumb against her cheek, a fleeting, electric touch that mirrored the moment in the suite. Keep your head down, Maya, he said, his voice low and grave. Do not talk to anyone about tonight, and lock your door. I will, she whispered. She stepped out of the car and hurried to the building entrance, clutching his jacket around her like armor. She didn't look back until she was inside the lobby. When she peered out through the cracked glass of the front door, the black car was still there. It waited until she was safely in the elevator before it pulled away, disappearing into the night. The next few days were a blur of nervous tension. Maya expected to be fired, or for the police to come knocking, or for the rival gang to return. But the world kept turning. The restaurant reopened 2 days later as if nothing had happened. The bullet holes patched and painted over, the shattered vase replaced, but things had changed. Dante returned. He came in on a Tuesday, a slow night. He didn't sit in the private back room. He sat in the main dining area, at table 4, right in the center of Maya's section. He was alone this time, save for 2 guards posted discreetly by the door. He ordered a coffee and sat there for 2 hours, reading a newspaper, checking his phone, and watching. Every time Maya walked past, she felt the weight of his gaze. It wasn't predatory anymore. It was steady, anchoring. When she poured him a refill, he didn't speak, but he caught her eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The staff noticed. "He is watching you," Elena whispered in the kitchen, slicing lemons with frantic energy. "He has been staring at you all night. What did you do?" "Maya?" "I did not do anything," Maya insisted, though her heart was doing flip-flops in her chest. By the end of the week, it became a routine. Dante Rinaldi, the king of Riverton, was becoming a fixture in Maya's section. He tipped $300 on a $4 coffee. He glared at a customer who spoke too rudely to her until the man stuttered an apology and left. He was marking his territory. He was letting the room know, without saying a word, that the waitress with the tired eyes and the sharp wit was under his protection. And Maya, terrified and thrilled in equal measure, found herself looking forward to the sound of the front door opening, hoping to see the man who had taken her to his room and touched her like she was something precious. 3 days had passed since the incident, and the shattered glass of La Sirena had been swept away, replaced by the illusion of normalcy. The polished mahogany tables gleamed under the warm amber lights. The jazz quartet played a soft, lulling rhythm in the corner, and the scent of garlic and roasting rosemary filled the air. To the casual observer, the restaurant was exactly what it claimed to be, the finest Italian dining experience in Riverton. But Maya Collins could feel the hairline fractures in the facade. She felt it in the way the other servers moved, a little too quickly, their eyes darting toward the front entrance every time the door opened. She felt it in the weight of the silence that fell over the kitchen whenever a car backfired on the street outside, and she felt it, most acutely, in the heavy, prickling sensation on the back of her neck whenever she stepped outside for her break. It was Tuesday, a damp and overcast evening. Maya pushed open the heavy steel door to the back alley, exhaling a long breath of steam into the cool air. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around her waist, leaning against the brick wall to check her phone. That was when she saw them again, across the street, parked under the flickering halo of a street lamp. It was a gray sedan. It was nondescript, the kind of car that blended into the pavement. But Maya knew it. She had seen it yesterday. She had seen it the day before. The engine was off, but 2 figures sat in the front seats, motionless, their faces obscured by the shadows. Maya squinted, trying to make out a license plate, but the angle was wrong. As if sensing her attention, the driver turned his head. Even from this distance, she felt the weight of his gaze. It was cold, assessing, and entirely focused on her. A shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature rattled down her spine. "Hey, sweetie, like working for the Rinaldis?" The voice from 2 nights ago echoed in her memory. A man who had stopped her while she was walking to the bus stop. He had smiled, but it had been a smile full of teeth and bad intentions. She had run the rest of the way home. Maya shoved her phone into her pocket and retreated inside, the heavy door clanging shut behind her like the gate of a fortress. She tried to shake off the unease, picking up a tray of espressos, but her hands were trembling. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted. The air pressure seemed to drop, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Dante Rinaldi had arrived. He walked through the main entrance, his presence commanding silence without him saying a word. He was wearing a navy suit tonight, the cut sharp and precise. His dark hair swept back from his forehead. He did not look at the host. He did not look at the menu. He looked straight at the window, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the street outside. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He had seen the car. Dante signaled to one of his men, a towering guard named Luca, and whispered something low and urgent. Luca nodded and slipped out the front door. Dante turned, his gaze sweeping the room until it locked onto Maya. He did not smile. He walked straight toward the bar where she was loading the dishwasher, moving with a directness that made the other staff scatter. "Maya," he said. She jumped, nearly dropping a saucer. Mr. Rinaldi, leave the dishes," he said, his voice low and controlled. He steered her away from the earshot of the bartender, guiding her into the small alcove near the wine cellar. His body blocked her from the view of the dining room. Up close, The intensity of his focus was overwhelming. He smelled of rain and that distinct, spicy cologne, and for a moment, Maya forgot how to breathe properly. "Has anyone approached you?" Dante asked. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Maya hesitated, looking down at her shoes. I am not sure what you mean." "Do not lie to me, Maya," he said, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a suppressed anger that she knew was not directed at her. "I saw the car outside. They are watching the staff entrance. Have they spoken to you?" Maya looked up, meeting his dark eyes. She saw the concern warring with the rage, and her defenses crumbled. "2 nights ago," she whispered, "a man at the bus stop. He asked if I liked working for the Rinaldis. And then the phone calls. No one speaks, just breathing. And then they hang up." Dante closed his eyes for a second, inhaling sharply through his nose. When he opened them again, the gold flecks in his irises were burning. "They think you know something," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "They think you heard the negotiations during the attack. You are a loose end to them." "I did not hear anything," Maya insisted, panic rising in her chest. "I told you that." "It does not matter what is true," Dante said, looking at her with a terrifying seriousness. "It matters what they believe, and right now, they believe you are a liability." He stepped back, checking his watch. "Finish your shift," he said, his tone shifting to pure command. "But do not go out back. Do not leave the building. When the last customer is gone, wait for me in the kitchen. Dante, do not argue, Maya, not on this." He turned and walked away before she could protest, disappearing into the private back rooms. Maya was left standing in the alcove, her heart hammering against her ribs, the tray of dirty espresso cups forgotten in her hands. The rest of the night passed in a blur of anxiety. Every time the door opened, Maya flinched. Every time a phone rang, she jumped. By the time the last patron had paid their bill and the busboys were stacking chairs on the tables, her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. The kitchen was empty, the stainless steel counters gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Maya stood near the service exit, her purse clutched to her chest, waiting. Dante appeared in the doorway. He had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong, corded forearms. He looked tired, but his eyes were alert. "You are not going home alone tonight," he said simply. "Pack your things. You are staying somewhere safe." Maya blinked, the exhaustion suddenly giving way to a spark of indignation. "Excuse me? I have a secure location," Dante said, walking past her to check the lock on the back door. "My penthouse. It has 24-hour security, reinforced glass, and a private elevator. You will be safe there." "I cannot just move in with you," Maya snapped, her voice echoing off the tile walls. "I have a life. Dante, I have a brother. I cannot just disappear because you say so." Dante turned to face her, his expression hardening. "You do not have a choice. Maya, that car outside, it's not a fan club. If you go home tonight, they will follow you. They will find out where you live. They will find Eli." "Do not bring Eli into this," she warned, stepping forward, anger flushing her cheeks. "I am trying to keep him out of it," Dante countered, his voice rising to match hers. He stepped into her space, looming over her, his frustration palpable. "Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to drag a civilian into my mess? I'm trying to keep you alive. Maya, then let me call the police. Let me handle this my way." "The police cannot help you with this," Dante said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "These men, a restraining order is just paper to them. I am the only one who can stop them." They stood in the empty dining room now, under the dimmed crystal chandeliers. The silence of the restaurant pressed in around them, heavy and charged. Maya looked up at him, her chest heaving with emotion. She was angry at the situation, angry at the danger, but beneath the anger was fear. And beneath the fear was that treacherous, magnetic pull she felt every time he was near. She saw the raw worry in his eyes. He wasn't trying to control her for the sake of power. He was terrified for her. "I need to call Eli," she said finally, her voice trembling. "He's staying at his friend David's house tonight to study. I need to tell him to stay there." Dante let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good," he said softly. "Tell him you picked up an extra shift. Tell him you are safe." Maya made the call, her hands shaking as she lied to her brother. When she hung up, she looked at Dante. He was watching her with a strange expression, something between regret and longing. "Let's go," he said gently. The drive to the penthouse was silent. Dante drove himself this time, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. He took a circuitous route, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds until he was satisfied they weren't being followed. The penthouse was located on the top floor of a steel and glass spire in the center of the city. When the private elevator doors slid open, Maya stepped into a world of understated luxury that made her breath catch. It wasn't the gaudy, gold-plated palace she had expected. It was modern, sleek, and surprisingly warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Riverton. The city lights spread out like a glittering carpet below. There were shelves lined with books, real books, with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. In the corner, the turntable she had seen in his office was set up on a walnut console, surrounded by stacks of vinyl. "This is nice," Maya murmured, feeling out of place in her worn sneakers and uniform slacks. Dante locked the elevator panel and tossed his keys into a bowl. "Make yourself at home," he said. He led her down a hallway lined with abstract black and white photography. He stopped at a heavy oak door and pushed it open. "This is the guest room," he said. "It has an ensuite bathroom. Fresh towels are in the cupboard. And Maya?" She turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, looking exhausted and devastatingly handsome. "The door locks from the inside," he said quietly. "Just so you know." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. He was telling her she was safe from him, too. "Thank you, Dante," she whispered. He nodded, turning to leave. As he passed her, the narrow hallway forced them close. His arm brushed against hers, a slow, friction-heavy contact that sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. They both froze for a second, the air between them suddenly thick with unsaid words. Then, without looking back, Dante walked away toward the living room. Maya showered, scrubbing the scent of the restaurant from her skin, but she couldn't wash away the tension. She dressed in the only comfortable thing she had found in the guest closet, one of Dante's spare dress shirts. It was huge on her, the white cotton hitting her mid-thigh. The sleeves rolled up to her elbows. It smelled like him. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gray car. She saw the gun from the restaurant. At 2 a.m, she gave up. She opened her door quietly and padded barefoot down the hallway. The penthouse was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city outside. She found Dante in the living room. He was sitting on the sofa, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, staring out at the skyline. He had discarded his tie and unbuttoned the top 3 buttons of his shirt. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He turned as she entered, his eyes widening slightly when he saw her in his shirt. His gaze traveled down her legs and back up to her face, darkening with an emotion she couldn't name. "Cannot sleep?" he asked, his voice rough with whiskey and fatigue. "No," Maya admitted. She walked over and sat on the opposite end of the sofa, tucking her legs underneath her. "Is that whiskey?" "Bourbon," he corrected. "Want some?" Maya shook her head. "I need a clear head." They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. It was an intimate silence, a shared solitude that felt safer than anything she had experienced in years. "I hate this," Dante said suddenly. He didn't look at her. He stared into his glass. "I hate dragging you into this. You work hard. You take care of your brother. You pay your bills. You do everything right. You do not deserve to be looking over your shoulder because of me." Maya looked at his profile, the sharp line of his jaw illuminated by the city lights. "It is not your fault," she said softly. "It is entirely my fault," Dante insisted bitterly. "My world. It infects everything it touches. I try to keep it contained, but it leaks out, like poison. Why do you stay in it?" Maya asked. Dante gave a harsh laugh. You do not just walk away, Maya. It is not a club membership. My father was in it. His father was in it. It is all I know. People rely on me. If I leave, the vacuum creates chaos. More violence. He turned to look at her, his expression raw. I promised myself I would never let an innocent person get hurt. And now look at you. Hiding in my apartment. I have been hiding for a long time. Dante, Maya confessed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Even before this, what do you mean? Maya picked at a loose thread on the sofa cushion. My dad, he was a good man, but he was weak. He gambled. He promised every week that he would stop, that he would protect us, and then he died. And he left us with nothing but debt collectors and fear. She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Every man who has ever promised to take care of me has left. Dante, they leave, or they lie, or they die. I learned a long time ago that the only person who can keep me safe is me. Dante set his glass down on the table with a sharp clink. He shifted on the sofa, moving closer to her. The distance between them vanished. I am not going to leave, he said fiercely, and I am not going to let anything happen to you. Maya looked at him, and the tears finally spilled over, tracking hot paths down her cheeks. It was too much. The fear, the exhaustion, the kindness in his eyes. Dante reached out. His hand, so large and capable of violence, was incredibly gentle as he cupped her jaw. His thumb swept across her cheekbone, wiping away the tear. His skin was warm, his touch grounding. Maya, he breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her every second to pull away, to tell him to stop. But she didn't want him to stop. She was tired of being strong. She wanted, just for a moment, to be held. She leaned forward, closing the last inch of distance. Their lips met. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't perfect. It was desperate. It was hesitant at first, a soft testing of boundaries, a question asked and answered in the dark. But then Dante groaned low in his throat, and the kiss deepened, shattering her control. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her steady. Maya's hands found purchase on his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted of bourbon and desire. His mouth moved over hers with a hungry, unpracticed intensity, as if he had forgotten how to be gentle but was trying, desperately, to remember for her sake. Maya opened to him, a soft sound escaping her throat. She felt his other hand splay across her lower back, the heat of his palm searing through the thin fabric of the shirt she wore. He pulled her flush against him, and she felt the hard wall of his chest, the rapid thud of his heart matching her own. For a minute, the world outside didn't exist. There were no gunmen, no debts, no rival crews. There was just Dante, the friction of his stubble against her chin, the strength of his arms, the overwhelming, terrifying reality of wanting him. They broke apart only when they needed air, their foreheads resting against each other. Maya was trembling, her breath coming in short gasps. Dante's eyes were closed, his chest heaving. "Maya," he whispered, his voice ragged. He pulled back slightly, looking at her with a gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold. He looked at her swollen lips, then up to her eyes. "If we do not stop now," he said, his voice straining with control, "I am not going to be able to stop. And I do not want you to wake up tomorrow and regret this." Maya looked at him, dazed. She wanted to tell him she wouldn't regret it. She wanted to pull him back, but the rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive this long, knew he was right. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dante let out a long, shaky exhale. He kissed her forehead, a chaste, lingering pressure that felt strangely more intimate than the passion before. "Go to bed, Maya," he said softly. "Lock the door." He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to her, putting physical distance between his desire and her safety. Maya watched him for a moment, her body humming with leftover electricity. Before she turned and fled to the guest room, she locked the door. But for the first time in her life, she wished she hadn't. The next morning, reality returned with the sunlight. Maya insisted on going to work. Dante argued, but eventually compromised, assigning 2 of his men to sit in the kitchen and another to watch the street. He drove her to La Serena himself, the silence in the car heavy with the memory of the night before. When she walked into the restaurant, she felt different. Her skin still felt sensitive where he had touched her. She avoided his gaze as she tied her apron, terrified that everyone could see the change in her. Around 10 o'clock, the front door opened. It wasn't a customer. A man in a cheap, rumpled suit walked in. He had the tired, cynical eyes of someone who had seen too much of the city's underbelly. He flashed a gold badge at the host and walked straight toward Maya. "Maya Collins?" he asked. "Yes." Maya wiped her hands on her apron, her stomach dropping. "Detective Reed," he said, "Riverton PD. We need to talk." He steered her toward a quiet corner, away from Dante's men. "We know you were in the room during the shooting," Reed said, cutting straight to the chase. "We know Rinaldi took you upstairs." "I gave my statement," Maya said defensively. "I did not see anything." "I am not here about the shooting," Reed said. He leaned in, his voice low. "I am here to warn you. You are a nice girl. Maya, you have a clean record. You have a kid brother. You do not belong in this world. I am just a waitress," Maya said, looking away. Reed let out a dry laugh. "Nobody is just anything around Dante Rinaldi. Listen to me. He looks like a gentleman. He acts like a savior. But people who get close to him, they tend to disappear, or they get hurt, or they end up in prison." He placed a card on the table. "When you realize what he really is, call me, before it is too late." Reed walked away, leaving the card sitting on the white tablecloth like a stain. Maya stared at it. She looked up and saw Dante across the room, talking to one of his men. He looked up, catching her eye. His face softened for a fraction of a second, a private communication just for her. Maya felt her heart divide in 2. One half remembered the gentle way he had wiped her tears and the heat of his kiss. The other half looked at the detective's card and remembered the gunshots. She picked up the card and slipped it into her pocket, right next to her phone. She didn't call him, but she didn't throw it away, either. The phone in Maya's apron pocket vibrated against her hip, a short, insistent buzz that felt like a warning shot. It was a Friday night at La Sirena, the kind of busy shift that usually numbed her mind to everything but the rhythm of service. But for the last week, Maya had been living with her nerves stripped raw. Every shadow looked like a gunman. Every sudden noise sounded like a shot. She stepped into the server station, pulling the device out with a trembling hand, a new message, unknown number. She tapped the screen, and the air left her lungs in a single, agonizing rush. It was a photograph, grainy and taken from a distance. It showed Eli walking out of his high school gates. He was laughing, his backpack slung over one shoulder, looking down at his sneakers. He looked so young, so oblivious. Beneath the image, a single line of text glowed white against the black background. "Tell your boyfriend to stop asking questions." Maya's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from sliding to the floor, her vision tunneling until all she could see was her brother's pixelated face. They were watching him. They knew where he went to school. They knew his schedule. She didn't think. She didn't finish her table's order. She turned and ran toward the kitchen, bursting through the double doors with a force that made the line cooks jump. She ignored the startled looks, scanning the room frantically until she saw Dante standing near the expediter window, talking to Marco. "Dante!" she screamed, her voice cracking. He turned instantly. The moment he saw her face, pale, wild-eyed, terror etched into every feature, his posture shifted from relaxed to lethal. He met her halfway across the kitchen, catching her by the arms before she could collapse. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. She couldn't speak. She just shoved the phone into his chest. Dante took it. He looked at the photo. He read the message. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop 20 degrees. Dante's face, usually a mask of controlled stoicism, twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated rage. His jaw locked so tight the muscles feathered beneath the skin, and his grip on her phone tightened until the plastic case creaked. "Everyone out," Dante snarled. He didn't shout, but the command was absolute. The chefs, the dishwashers, even the floor manager scrambled for the exit, sensing the violence radiating off him like heat from a furnace. When the room was empty, Dante looked back at Maya. The fury in his eyes was terrifying, but it wasn't directed at her. "I will kill them," he said. The words were quiet, devoid of bluster, stated as a simple, inevitable fact. "I will make whoever sent this regret ever breathing air. I do not care about them," Maya cried, grabbing the lapels of his suit jacket, shaking him. "I care about Eli. They are at his school. Dante, they are watching him." "I know," Dante said. He grabbed her wrists, holding her steady. "Listen to me. I am sending a detail to him now. 4 men, 2 at the school, 2 at the house. He will not be out of their sight for a second. It is not enough," Maya sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. "You said we were safe. You said you would handle it." "I will handle it," Dante vowed. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his arms around her tightly, as if he could physically shield her from the digital threat. "I swear to you, Maya, nothing will touch him. But promises." Maya was learning were fragile things in Dante Rinaldi's world, despite the detail, despite the 4 armed men shadowing a 16-year-old boy. The attack happened 3 days later. It was not a kidnapping, it was not a hit, it was a message. Maya was at the penthouse, folding laundry in the guest room, trying to keep her hands busy. When Dante's phone rang in the hallway, she heard him answer, heard the silence that followed, and then heard the one word that shattered her world: hospital. The drive to Riverton General was a blur of motion and nausea. Maya didn't remember getting into the car. She didn't remember the traffic. She only remembered the cold, antiseptic smell of the waiting room and the look on the doctor's face when she finally found him. "He's going to be fine." "Miss Collins," the doctor said gently. "He has a hairline fracture in his wrist, 2 cracked ribs, and significant bruising, but there is no internal bleeding. He's lucky." Lucky. The word tasted like ash. Maya pushed past the doctor and into the recovery room. Eli was lying in the bed, looking small and broken against the white sheets. His left eye was swollen shut, a vivid purple bruise blooming across his cheekbone. His arm was in a cast. "Eli," she breathed, rushing to his side. He opened his good eye, attempting a weak, lopsided grin. "Hey, sis, you should see the other guys." Maya didn't laugh. She grabbed his uninjured hand, pressing it to her forehead, weeping silently. She felt a shadow fall over the bed and looked up. Dante stood in the doorway. He looked devastated. The great, untouchable mafia boss looked like he had been hollowed out. His fists were clenched at his sides, his knuckles white. He stared at Eli's battered face with a mixture of guilt and fury that was painful to witness. "Get out," Maya whispered. Dante flinched as if she had struck him. "Maya, I said get out," she screamed, spinning around to face him. Her grief exploded into rage. "Look at him! Dante, look at what you did. I did not. You brought this to us," Maya accused, stepping toward him, jabbing a finger into his chest. "We were fine. We were poor. And we were struggling. But we were safe. Then you showed up with your suits and your guns and your enemies, and now my brother is in a hospital bed." Dante took the assault. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He stood there like a statue, absorbing her hatred because he knew he deserved it. "You are right," he said, his voice rough. "This is on me." "Why didn't you stop them?" she sobbed, her anger draining away into despair. "You said you had men watching him. They waited until he went into the locker room," Dante said grimly. "My men were outside the gym doors. It was a blind spot, a 3-minute window. They knew exactly where to hit. It was a mole. It had to be. Someone inside had given up the security details positions. I am fixing this, Dante said. He looked past her at Eli, then back to Maya. I am not asking anymore. Maya, you cannot go back to that apartment. Neither of you. I am not going anywhere with you. Maya spat. Yes, you are, Dante said, because if you go back to that apartment, they will finish the job. This was a warning. Next time, they won't stop at broken ribs. Maya looked back at Eli. He was watching them. Groggy but alert, he looked terrified, not of Dante, but of the people who had done this to him. "We go to your estate," Maya said, her voice trembling, "until Eli is healed, and then we are gone. Do you hear me? Then we are done." Dante nodded once, his eyes dark with a pain she refused to acknowledge. Understood. The Rinaldi estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located on the cliffs outside the city, it was surrounded by 12-foot walls, iron gates, and enough security cameras to rival a bank. They moved in that night. Eli was set up in a ground-floor suite so he wouldn't have to climb stairs with his ribs. Maya took the room next to him. For the first 2 days, the silence in the house was deafening. Maya spoke to Dante only when necessary, and only in monosyllables. She spent her time hovering over Eli, fluffing his pillows, bringing him water, watching the perimeter like a guard dog. But Eli, with the resilience of youth, began to bounce back, and surprisingly, he was the one who bridged the gap. On the third afternoon, Maya walked into the living room to find Eli sitting on the massive leather sectional, his cast propped up on a pillow. Dante was sitting in the armchair opposite him. The television was on, tuned to a basketball game. "No way," Eli was saying, pointing at the screen with his good hand. "You cannot tell me LeBron is better than Jordan. That is blasphemy." Dante smirked, taking a sip of espresso. "Jordan was an artist. LeBron is a machine. It is a different game. Kid." He stopped when he saw Maya. The easy camaraderie vanished, replaced by the tension that had defined their relationship since the hospital. "Hey, Maya," Eli said, oblivious to the shift. "Did you check out Dante's shoe collection? He has the original 85s. Mint condition. He showed you his closet," Maya asked, looking at Dante. "He asked." Dante said simply. "He likes sneakers. I have sneakers." Maya watched them. She watched the way Dante was careful not to sit too close to Eli's injured side. She watched the way he spoke to her brother, not as a child and not as a victim, but as a young man. He was trying. He was trying so hard to be gentle, to be normal, in a world that was anything but. The ice around Maya's heart began to crack. She couldn't help it. She saw the monster the world saw, but she also saw the man who sat watching basketball with a teenager because he felt guilty about his broken ribs. "Can I get anyone water?" Maya asked, her voice softer than it had been in days. Dante looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "That would be nice. Thank you." That night, the weather turned. A storm rolled in off the coast, violent and loud. Thunder shook the foundations of the house, rattling the heavy glass panes of the windows. Maya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Every clap of thunder sounded like a gunshot. Every flash of lightning looked like a muzzle flare. Her heart raced, adrenaline flooding her system, her body remembering the terror of the restaurant. She couldn't breathe. She threw off the covers and paced the room. It was too small. The air was too thin. She opened her door and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, shadows stretching long and distorted across the floor. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering in her thin silk pajamas. She walked past Eli's room. He was snoring softly, thank God, and continued down the hall, guided by a faint light spilling from under a door at the far end, Dante's room. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the wood. She really shouldn't. The door opened before she could knock. Dante stood there, silhouetted by the lamp behind him. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, his hair mussed as if he had been running his hands through it. He didn't look surprised to see her. He looked relieved. "I heard you pacing," he said quietly. "I cannot sleep," Maya admitted, her voice shaking. "The thunder." "I know," Dante said. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." Maya stepped into his sanctuary. It was a masculine room, sparse and clean, dominated by a king-sized bed and a wall of windows overlooking the storm-lashed ocean. I will sit for a minute," she said, hovering near the armchair. "Sit on the bed," Dante said, moving to sit on the edge of the mattress himself. "It is more comfortable. Just talk. I promise." Maya sat. She kept a foot of distance between them, pulling her knees up to her chest. Outside. A crack of thunder tore through the sky, and she flinched hard, squeezing her eyes shut. When I was 7, Dante's voice cut through the noise, low and steady. My father disappeared for 4 days. Maya opened her eyes. She looked at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his hands. Everyone said he was on business, Dante continued, but I knew. I saw the way my mother was crying in the kitchen. I thought he was dead. I sat by the front door for 96 hours. I was terrified. Every time a car drove by, I thought it was the police coming to tell us they found a body. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. I know what that fear feels like. Maya, the kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to swallow, the kind that makes you feel like the walls are closing in. Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek. You never told me that. I do not tell people that, Dante said. But I am telling you, you're not weak for being scared. Maya, you are reacting to a world that is insane. The emotional distance between them, built up by days of anger and guilt, dissolved in the span of a heartbeat. He understood. He wasn't just the cause of her fear. He was the only person who truly understood the shape of it. Maya shifted. She uncurled her legs and leaned sideways, resting her head against his shoulder. It was a surrender. Dante stiffened for a second, then relaxed. His arm came around her, heavy and warm, pulling her into his side. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the steady, rhythmic thud of his heart beneath the cotton of his shirt. It was stronger than the thunder. I am sorry I yelled at you, she whispered. Don't be, Dante murmured, resting his chin on the top of her head. You were right. They sat like that for a long time, the storm raging outside, the silence inside filled with a new, heavy tension. It wasn't the tension of anger anymore. It was the tension of gravity. Maya lifted her head. Dante was already looking at her. His eyes were dark, dilated, searching her face with a hunger that made her breath hitch. Maya, he warned, his voice a low rumble. She didn't listen. She reached up and threaded her fingers through the hair at the nape of his neck. It was soft, contrary to everything else about him. Dante. He tilted her chin up with his free hand. His touch was reverence. He leaned in slowly, giving her time, always giving her time. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't like the first time. The first time had been an explosion of relief. This was different. This was a question. He kissed her slowly, tasting her, his mouth moving over hers with a deliberate, languid heat that sent fire racing through her veins. Maya whimpered softly, the sound vibrating against his lips. She pressed closer, her body seeking the solid warmth of his. Dante groaned, a sound torn from his chest. He shifted, pulling her with him until she was straddling his lap, her legs on either side of his hips. The change in position shifted the dynamic instantly. The kiss turned urgent, deep, and consuming. Maya gripped his shoulders, her nails digging lightly into the muscle, anchoring herself as the world spun. Dante's hands roamed her back, tracing the curve of her spine, his palms hot through the silk of her pajamas. He held her waist, his thumbs pressing into the soft skin, pulling her hips flush against his. She felt the hardness of his desire, the sheer power he was holding back. His lips trailed down her jawline, finding the sensitive spot beneath her ear. Maya arched her neck, gasping, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. More, she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. Dante's hand moved up her ribcage, his thumb grazing the underwire of her top. He shuddered, his breath hot against her neck. He wanted her. She could feel it in every tense line of his body. But then he stopped. He pulled back, his chest heaving, his forehead resting against hers, his hands stilled on her waist. "Maya?" he rasped. "Yes," she breathed, eyes still closed, chasing the feeling. "Open your eyes," Dante commanded softly. She opened them. He was looking at her with a fierce, painful intensity. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Really sure. You are scared. You are vulnerable. I will not be another thing that happens to you. I will not be a mistake you make because of the storm." Maya looked at him. She saw the restraint, the honor beneath the criminal exterior. He could have taken everything and she would have let him. But he wouldn't. Not like this. I am sure I want you, she whispered, but maybe you are right about the timing. Dante let out a long, ragged exhale. He kissed her nose, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Okay, he said. Okay. He didn't push her away. He simply adjusted his hold, wrapping his arms around her tightly, burying his face in her neck. Stay, though, he muttered into her skin. Just sleep. Please. I will stay. She promised. They didn't get under the covers. They lay on top of the duvet, fully clothed, tangled together like driftwood washed up on the shore. Maya lay with her head on his chest, her leg thrown over his. Dante held her as if she were made of glass, his hand stroking her hair rhythmically until the thunder faded into the distance. They whispered in the dark, promises of safety, confessions of fear, until exhaustion finally dragged them under. While they slept, across the city in a dimly lit warehouse, a different kind of conversation was happening. Marco stood under a flickering halogen light, pacing back and forth. Opposite him sat Sal, another capo in the Rinaldi organization. The girl is a problem, Marco spat, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. Since she showed up, Dante is soft. He's distracted. He's got 4 guys watching a teenager while we have shipments sitting at the docks exposed. She is a civilian, Sal grunted, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. The boss likes her. The boss is compromised, Marco shouted, his voice echoing in the empty space. Vince Corallo knows it. Why do you think he hit the kid? He knows Dante is focusing on the girl and not the business. He knows because someone told him, Sal said, looking up slowly. Marco froze for a fraction of a second, then scowled. Yeah, someone did. And when I find out who is leaking intel, I will kill them myself. But that does not change the facts. Maya Collins is a liability, and liabilities get cut. Sal watched him, his eyes narrowing. You better be careful, Marco. You cut the wrong thread, the whole suit falls apart. I am doing what is best for the family, Marco muttered, throwing his cigarette to the floor and crushing it under his heel. Even if Dante cannot see it, back at the estate. Dante woke up with the sun on his face and Maya in his arms, but the peace was an illusion. He could feel the net closing in. He knew about the mole. He knew Vince wasn't done, and as he looked down at the woman sleeping on his chest, he knew that the hardest choice of his life was rushing toward him like a freight train. The air in the foyer of the Rinaldi estate was heavy, suffocating under the weight of unspoken fears. It was 7 p.m, but the sky outside was already pitch black, a starless void that seemed to press against the reinforced glass windows. Dante stood by the heavy oak door, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He was not wearing a suit jacket yet. It hung over the banister, concealing the shoulder holster he had strapped on moments before. He looked calm, terrifyingly so. But Maya could see the tension in the set of his shoulders and the white-knuckle grip he had on his watch as he fastened it. Please, do not go, Maya whispered. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold her shattering composure together. She wore the same oversized shirt she had worn the night of the storm, a stark reminder of the intimacy they had shared just hours ago. Now, that intimacy felt like a prelude to a funeral. Dante turned to her. His eyes were dark, shadowed by exhaustion and resolve. I have to... Maya, he said, his voice low. Vince agreed to the sit-down. This is the only way to end it. If I do not negotiate a ceasefire tonight, they will keep coming. They will come for Eli. They will come for you. I cannot live like that. I will not let you live like that. It is a trap, Maya insisted, stepping closer, her voice rising in desperation. You know it is. Why would he agree to meet in the warehouse district? It is deserted. It is a kill box. Because it is neutral ground. Dante lied. He knew it was likely a trap. He knew the odds were 50-50 at best, but he had to take the gamble. He walked toward her, stopping when they were inches apart. He reached out, his large hands cupping her face, his thumbs brushing away the fear etched into her skin. I am taking Luca and Paolo, the best men I have. We will be in and out. 1 hour. Maya shook her head. tears spilling over her lashes. She grabbed the front of his shirt, twisting the fabric in her fists, pulling him toward her with a desperate, frantic strength. "Come back to me," she choked out. Dante let out a ragged breath. He pulled her into him, crushing her against his chest. It wasn't a gentle embrace. It was fierce, possessive, terrified. It was the hug of a man who wasn't sure if he would ever hold this woman again. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not soft. It was not slow. It was a collision. Maya met him with equal force, opening her mouth to him, tasting the coffee and the mint and the underlying metallic tang of adrenaline. She kissed him like she could breathe her life into him, like she could anchor him to the earth so he couldn't leave. Her hands moved up to grip his hair, pulling him down, while his arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly off the floor. For a long minute, there was nothing but the desperate, frantic heat of their mouths and the pounding of their hearts. It was a goodbye disguised as a kiss. When Dante finally pulled back, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I will come back," he promised, his voice rough. "I have something to come back for now." He kissed her forehead once, hard, and then pulled away. He grabbed his jacket, shrugged it on, and walked out the door without looking back. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industry. Rusted skeletons of old factories loomed against the night sky, and the silence was broken only by the distant wail of a siren and the crunch of tires on gravel. Dante's black SUV rolled to a stop inside the perimeter of an abandoned shipping depot. The meeting point was a cavernous loading bay, lit by a single flickering halogen bulb that cast long, dancing shadows across the concrete floor. Dante stepped out, flanked by Luca and Paolo. He kept his hands visible, away from his holster, but his muscles were coiled, ready to snap into violence at the slightest provocation. Vince Corallo was waiting. The rival boss sat on a folding chair in the center of the bay, surrounded by 6 of his own men. Vince was older than Dante, with a face like a clenched fist and eyes that glittered with malice. "Dante," Vince said, spreading his arms wide. "You look tired, Vince," Dante replied, stopping 10 feet away. "Let us skip the pleasantries. I'm here to talk terms." "Terms?" Vince laughed, a dry, grating sound. "You're in no position to dictate terms. Your operations are bleeding. Your shipments are being intercepted. And your little waitress, she is quite the distraction, isn't she?" Dante's expression didn't flicker, but inside, a cold rage ignited. "We leave the civilians out of this. That is the rule. Rules change when the king gets weak." Vince sneered. He stood up, kicking the chair back. "You know, Dante, I have to thank you. You made this very easy. I always knew where you were going to be. I always knew your schedule. It is almost like someone was whispering in my ear." Dante went still. He had suspected a mole, but hearing Vince confirm it turned the suspicion into a concrete, icy reality. His mind raced. Who? Who knew about the meeting? Who knew the roots? "Someone close," Vince mocked, seeing the realization on Dante's face. "Someone you trust." Dante scanned the shadows, his eyes darting to Vince's men, then back to his own. Luca and Paolo were statues, guns drawn now, sensing the shift in the air. "And now," Vince said, his voice dropping, "we end it, back at the estate." Maya was pacing the living room, wearing a path into the expensive Persian rug. The silence of the house was maddening. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a hammer blow. Her phone rang. She dove for it, hoping it was Dante. It wasn't. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice trembling. "Miss Collins, it is Paolo." The voice was breathless, distorted by wind and noise. "Paolo? Where is Dante?" "It is a setup," Paolo shouted. The connection crackled. "We are pinned down. The exits are blocked. They knew we were coming." Gunfire erupted in the background, a dry, popping sound that made Maya scream. "Where are you?" she cried. "Paolo! Warehouse 4, the old textile plant near the docks. The south road is blocked. They blew the..." The line went dead. Maya stared at the phone, the silence of the room rushing back in. He was trapped. He was going to die. Panic clawed at her throat, threatening to choke her. She looked at the security guards posted by the front door. They were looking at her. Confused by her scream, They wouldn't take her. They had orders to keep her here. If she told them Dante was in trouble, they would lock the place down. She couldn't wait. She turned and ran toward the kitchen, grabbing the spare set of keys Dante kept in the junk drawer, keys to the nondescript sedan he used for low-profile errands. She sprinted out the side door, into the garage. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the keys twice before she managed to unlock the car. She threw herself into the driver's seat and slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as she peeled out of the garage. She didn't know the exact address, but she had lived in Riverton her whole life. She knew the textile plant. She knew the docks. Maya drove like a madwoman. She ran 2 red lights, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. She just gripped the wheel and prayed. 20 minutes later, she saw it. The looming silhouette of the old textile factory. Flashes of light were visible through the broken windows, muzzle flares. Maya killed the headlights and coasted the car down an alleyway, parking behind a rusted dumpster. She got out, crouching low, the smell of gunpowder and ozone sharp in the air. She crept toward the side of the building, her sneakers making no sound on the damp pavement. She found a side door that was slightly ajar and slipped inside. The noise was deafening. The warehouse was a chaotic battleground. Bullets sparked off metal pillars and chewed into concrete. Maya hid behind a stack of rotting pallets, peering out into the main bay. She saw him. Dante was crouched behind a heavy wooden crate 50 feet away. He was firing back, his movement controlled but desperate. Even from this distance, she could see the dark stain spreading on his white shirt. His left shoulder. He was hit. Luca was down, motionless on the floor a few yards away. Paolo was providing cover fire, but they were outnumbered. Vince's men had the high ground on the catwalks. Then, Maya saw the movement in the shadows near the rear exit. A man was slipping away from Dante's position. He wasn't firing at the enemy. He was retreating, holding a phone to his ear, looking back with a cold, detached expression. Marco. The realization hit Maya like a physical blow. Marco, the lieutenant, Marco, the man who had looked at her with such disdain. He was the mole. He had led Dante into this slaughterhouse and was now leaving him to die. Maya looked around frantically. She couldn't fight. She didn't have a gun. She needed to change the odds. Her eyes landed on a red box mounted on the wall 10 feet away, a fire alarm. And next to it, a heavy metal wrench left by some long-forgotten maintenance worker. Maya took a breath. She thought of Eli's bruised face. She thought of Dante's hand wiping away her tears. She grabbed the wrench. She sprinted across the open space, ignoring the shout from one of Vince's men on the catwalk. A bullet chipped the concrete near her foot, but she didn't stop. She reached the alarm and swung the wrench with all her strength. Clang! The glass shattered. She slammed the button with her fist. The result was instantaneous. An ear-splitting siren began to wail, echoing off the metal walls like a banshee. A second later, the overhead sprinklers exploded into life. Torrents of water rained down on the warehouse floor, creating a curtain of gray mist that obscured everything. The halogen lights sizzled and popped, plunging the room into a strobe light chaos. Vince's men shouted in confusion, their visibility reduced to zero. The gunfire became sporadic, wild. Maya didn't stop. She ran back to the side door, out into the alley, and jumped back into the sedan. She reversed the car, lining it up with the loading bay door that was partially open. She floored the accelerator. The car surged forward, smashing through the corrugated metal of the door with a screech of tearing steel. She spun the wheel, drifting the car sideways into the middle of the bay, placing the vehicle between Vince's shooters and Dante's position. "Get in!" she screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. Dante looked up, shock registering on his blood-streaked face. For a second, he just stared at her, unable to comprehend that the waitress from La Sirena had just driven a sedan through a wall of gunfire to save him. Paolo grabbed Dante by his good arm. "Go, boss!" They scrambled toward the car. Bullets pinged off the chassis, shattering the rear window. Paolo shoved Dante into the back seat and dove into the passenger side. "Drive!" Paolo roared. Maya stomped on the gas. The car fishtailed on the wet concrete, tires smoking before finding traction. She sped toward the exit she had created, smashing through the debris and bursting out into the night. She didn't look back. She drove. She drove until the warehouse was a speck in the rearview mirror, until the sirens faded, until her hands were numb on the wheel. "Where?" she asked, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "Where do I go?" "Safe house," Paolo rasped, clutching his side. "North District, 42 Elm Street." Maya nodded, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Dante was slumped against the door. His skin was the color of gray ash. His eyes were half closed, glazed and unfocused. The blood from his shoulder had soaked through his shirt, coating his entire left side in crimson. "Dante?" she called out, panic rising in her chest. "Dante, stay with me." He didn't answer. His head lolled forward. "Keep driving," Paolo said grimly. "Do not stop." They reached the safe house, a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. 10 minutes later, Paolo helped Maya drag Dante out of the car. He was dead weight now, barely conscious. They got him inside and laid him on a dusty mattress in the back room. Paolo immediately began making calls, barking orders for a clean doctor. Maya ignored everything. She knelt beside the bed, her hands slick with Dante's blood. She pressed her hands to his face, trying to warm his cold skin. "Dante," she whispered, "look at me, please." His eyelids fluttered. He looked at her, but she wasn't sure he was seeing her. "Maya," he breathed, You came, I came." She sobbed, brushing the wet hair from his forehead. "I am here. I am not going anywhere. You should have run," he murmured, his voice fading. "No," she said fiercely. "I do not run. Not from you." The doctor arrived in a flurry of activity, pushing Maya aside to work on the wound. Maya retreated to the corner of the room, but she didn't leave. She watched as they cut off his shirt, revealing the angry, bleeding hole in his shoulder. She watched as they stitched him up, the needle flashing in the dim light. When the doctor finally stepped back, wiping his hands, he nodded to Paolo. He lost a lot of blood, but the bullet missed the artery. He will live. Maya let out a sob of relief and rushed back to the bedside. She took Dante's hand, gripping it tightly. He was sedated now, sleeping deeply, his breathing shallow but steady. She pulled a chair up to the bed and sat down. She didn't care about the blood on her clothes. She didn't care about the danger. She realized, with a terrifying clarity, that her life before this moment didn't matter anymore. This was her life, this man, with his scarred hands and his broken world. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet room. She hadn't meant to say it, but now that it was out, it felt like the only truth left. "I love you, Dante. You have to wake up. You are the only place I feel safe. You cannot leave me." She laid her head on the mattress next to his hand, her fingers interlaced with his. She repeated the words over and over, a prayer to a universe that hadn't been kind to either of them. "I love you. Come back." And deep in the fog of anesthesia and pain, Dante Rinaldi heard her. The words were a lifeline thrown into the dark water. He grabbed onto them, he held on, and he decided, in the silence of his own mind, that if he survived this, he would burn the world down to keep her safe. The gray fog of anesthesia receded slowly, replaced by a sharp, throbbing heat in Dante's left shoulder. He blinked, his eyelashes feeling heavy, and tried to orient himself. The ceiling was cracked plaster, stained with water damage, not the silk wallpaper of his penthouse, and not the sterile tiles of a hospital. The safe house. He turned his head to the right, ignoring the spike of pain that shot down his arm. Maya was there. She was asleep in a hard wooden chair pulled right up to the edge of the mattress. Her body slumped forward, her head resting on the sheets near his hip. Her dark hair was messy, tangles falling over her face, and even in sleep, her brow was furrowed with worry. Dante stared at her for a long time. The memories of the warehouse were fragmented, flashes of muzzle fire, the roar of an engine, the feeling of being dragged. But one thing was crystal clear. He remembered her voice. He remembered her driving a sedan through a wall of gunfire. And he remembered what she had whispered when she thought he was dying. "I love you. You are the only place I feel safe." He moved his right hand, the uninjured one, and covered hers where it rested on the bed. He squeezed gently. Maya jerked awake instantly. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Panic etched into her features until her gaze landed on his open eyes. "Dante!" she gasped. She scrambled closer, gearing her hands hovering over him, terrified to touch him and cause pain. "You are awake," she breathed, tears instantly filling her eyes again. "You are awake." "I am awake," Dante rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. Maya let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry, and pressed her forehead against his good shoulder. I thought you were not coming back." Dante moved his hand to the back of her head, threading his fingers through her hair. "I heard you," he whispered. Maya pulled back slightly, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You heard what?" "I heard you say you loved me," Dante said, his voice gaining a little more strength. "I heard you say I was your safe place." Maya flushed, looking down at the sheets. I did not think you could hear that. I heard every word," Dante said. He waited until she looked at him again. His eyes were dark, serious, and stripped of all their usual defenses. "I feel the same. Maya, I have never felt safe anywhere. Not until I met you. Your voice. That is what pulled me back. I could not leave you alone in this mess." Maya leaned down and kissed him gently, careful of his injury. It was a soft, chaste seal on a promise made in the dark. "We are not out of it yet," she whispered against his lips. She was right. An hour later, Paolo entered the room. He looked exhausted, his arm in a sling, but his expression was grim. "Boss?" he said, nodding to Dante. "Good to see you upright." "Sit rep," Dante commanded. Sitting up despite Maya's protest. "Vince is furious," Paolo said. "He lost 4 guys at the warehouse. He knows the ambush failed. Word on the street is he is scorched earth now. He wants La Serena burned to the ground. He wants you dead. And he knows about the girl." Dante's jaw tightened. "How?" "Marco." Paolo spat the name like a curse. "We found him. He was trying to skip town, heading for the train station. We have him in the basement." Dante swung his legs over the edge of the bed. The room spun for a second, but he gritted his teeth and forced the world to steady. "Get me a shirt," he said. 5 minutes later, Dante sat in a folding chair in the damp basement of the safe house. Marco was tied to a support beam, his face bruised, looking terrified. "Why?" Dante asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Marco swallowed hard, refusing to meet Dante's eyes. "He promised me the territory. Dante, you were getting soft, focusing on the girl, ignoring the business. Vince said he would make me king of Riverton if I gave him the route." Dante stared at him. He didn't feel anger anymore. He just felt cold. "You betrayed your brothers for a promise from a snake," Dante said. "Vince would have put a bullet in your head the moment you were no longer useful." He stood up, wincing slightly as his shoulder pulled. He pulled the heavy pistol from his waistband. Marco squeezed his eyes shut, shaking. "Do it, just do it." Dante raised the gun. "Dante, no." Maya's voice rang out from the stairs. Dante froze. He didn't turn around. "Go upstairs, Maya," he ordered. "No," she said, her footsteps coming closer. She walked until she was standing between Dante and Marco. She looked at Dante, her eyes pleading. "Do not do this. He tried to kill us," Dante said, his eyes hard. "He sold us out." "I know," Maya said, "and he deserves to rot for it. But not like this. If you pull that trigger, you are just doing what Vince would do. You are better than that. Please. Dante, no more blood, not in front of me." Dante looked at her. He saw the desperation in her face. She wasn't asking to save Marco. She was asking to save Dante's soul. She was asking him to choose a different path. Right here, in this damp basement. He looked at Marco, who was staring at Maya in shock. Dante slowly lowered the gun. He engaged the safety with a loud click. "You are lucky she is here," Dante said to Marco, "because if it were up to me, you would not leave this room." He turned to Paolo. "Put him on a boat," Dante ordered. "Something heading far away. South America, Asia. I do not care. If he ever sets foot in Riverton again, if I ever even hear his name whispered on the wind, kill him." Marco slumped against the beam, sobbing with relief. "Get him out of my sight," Dante said. He turned and walked toward the stairs, taking Maya's hand as he passed. He didn't let go until they were back in the light. The final confrontation could not be fought in a warehouse. It had to be fought on Dante's terms. "We use the restaurant," Dante decided later that night. "It is the only place Vince will feel confident attacking. He wants to destroy my legacy? I will let him walk right into it." The plan was high risk. It relied on timing, technology, and a terrifying amount of trust. Dante reached out to the one person he knew wanted Vince as badly as he did, Detective Reed. It was an uneasy alliance, brokered over a burner phone, but Reed agreed. He wanted the caller, and he knew he couldn't get close to Vince without bait. Maya was the bait. She insisted on it. Dante fought her for an hour, shouting until his voice was hoarse. But she refused to back down. "He knows my face. Dante," she argued, "if I am there, working, he will think it is business as usual. He will think you are hiding. It is the only way to lure him in before he burns the place down with us inside." Reluctantly terrified, Dante agreed. 2 nights later, La Serena opened its doors. The restaurant looked normal. The candles flickered, the wine flowed, and the music played, but underneath the surface, everything had changed. The staff were all Dante's most trusted men, disguised in waiter uniforms. Micro cameras were hidden in the flower arrangements, and the exits were rigged with magnetic locks controlled from a laptop in the building across the alley. That was where Dante sat. He was watching the bank of monitors, his injured arm in a sling, his face pale in the glow of the screens. He watched Maya move through the dining room on the high-definition feed. She looked calm, professional, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands as she poured water. "You are doing great, baby," he whispered to the screen, though she couldn't hear him. Just a little longer. Eli was safe. He was 3 towns over, guarded by Luca in a hotel room paid for with cash. Maya was the only piece on the board that was exposed. At 10 o'clock, the trap snapped shut. The front door opened. Vince Corallo walked in. He wasn't alone. He had 4 men with him, all wearing heavy coats that did little to conceal the weapons underneath. They didn't wait to be seated. They fanned out, blocking the entrance. Maya was near the kitchen. She froze when she saw Vince. He spotted her instantly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He walked toward her, weaving through the empty tables. "Miss Collins," Vince said, his voice oily and loud in the quiet room. "Working late?" Maya clutched her tray to her chest. "We are closed," she said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "Oh, I think you can accommodate us," Vince said. He stepped closer, crowding her space. "Where is he? Where is your boyfriend? I do not know where he is," Maya said. "He does not tell me his business." Vince laughed. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. "I think you are lying, but that is okay. You are going to tell me. And then you are going to testify that Dante Rinaldi ran a criminal empire out of this kitchen. And if you do that, maybe I will let your brother finish high school." Maya stared at him with pure hatred. She dropped her tray. It crashed to the floor, the noise echoing like a gunshot. While he was talking, her other hand had slipped into her apron pocket. She pressed send on the text she had typed 10 minutes ago. "He's here." In the building across the street, Dante saw the signal. "Now!" he roared into his radio. Simultaneously, Dante's men inside the restaurant drew their weapons, but they didn't fire. They held their positions, creating a perimeter. "Reed, move in!" Dante shouted. Police sirens wailed from every direction, piercing the night. Blue and red lights flooded through the front windows of La Serena. A megaphone crackled. "This is the Riverton police! Drop your weapons! We have the building surrounded!" Vince looked around, realizing he was trapped. His face twisted into a snarl. He didn't drop his weapon. Instead, he yanked Maya in front of him, wrapping his arm around her throat and pressing the barrel of his gun to her temple. "Back off," Vince screamed at the room. "Back off or she dies." The standoff was frozen. The police were outside. Dante's men were inside, and Maya was the shield keeping Vince alive. Dante couldn't watch from a screen anymore. He left the command post, running down the stairs, ignoring the agony in his shoulder. He burst through the back door of the restaurant, entering the kitchen. He walked through the swinging doors into the dining room. Everyone froze. Dante Rinaldi walked into the center of the room. He was unarmed. He held his hands up, palms open. He was wearing a simple black shirt, his sling stark against the dark fabric. "Let her go." "Vince," Dante said calmly. Vince's eyes went wide. "Look at you." He spat. "The king of Riverton, you look like garbage." "Let her go," Dante repeated, stepping closer. "This is between you and me. It always has been. She's a waitress. She's nothing to you. She is everything to you," Vince yelled, pressing the gun harder against Maya's head. Maya winced, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't scream. Dante stopped 10 feet away. He looked at Maya. He poured every ounce of love and reassurance he had into his gaze. "You are right," Dante said to Vince. "She is everything. That is why you're going to trade." "Trade?" Vince narrowed his eyes. "Me for her," Dante said. He stopped walking. "I am unarmed. I am injured. You want the trophy? You want the man who runs this city? Here I am. Take me as a hostage. Let the girl walk out the front door to the cops." "Dante, no!" Maya screamed, struggling against Vince's grip. "No, do not do it. Quiet!" Vince shouted, shaking her. Dante ignored the outburst. He kept his eyes on Vince. "Think about it. Vince, you walk out with a waitress, the cops will snipe you the second you step on the sidewalk. You walk out with Dante Rinaldi, you have leverage. You have a bargaining chip the size of the city." Vince hesitated. The logic was sound. Dante was the prize. "No, Dante," Maya sobbed, her heart breaking. "Please, I do not matter. You matter. You cannot sacrifice yourself for me." Dante looked at her then, and his expression was heartbreakingly tender. "You are wrong, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion but loud enough for everyone to hear. "My empire? This restaurant, the money, it is dust. It means nothing without you. You and Eli. You are the only real things I have ever known. Your life matters more than anything I have built." The raw honesty of the moment hung in the air. Even Vince's men seemed shaken by the admission. It was a weakness. Yes, but it was also a terrifying kind of strength. Vince stared at Dante. He saw the resolve in his enemy's eyes. He saw a man who was willing to die for love. "Fine," Vince sneered. "Come here." Slowly. Vince shifted, moving the gun just an inch away from Maya's head to aim it at Dante as he approached. That inch was all Detective Reed needed. From the rooftop across the street, through the plate glass window, the sniper took the shot. Crack! The bullet struck Vince's hand, shattering the pistol grip and sending the weapon skittering across the floor. Vince howled in pain. "Releasing Maya. Now!" Dante shouted. He dove forward, not toward Vince, but toward Maya. He tackled her, covering her body with his own as the police stormed the front entrance. Flashbangs went off. Dante's men rushed Vince's crew, disarming them in seconds. It was over in a heartbeat. Maya lay on the floor, Dante's heavy weight pressing her down, shielding her from the chaos one last time. She was sobbing, clutching his shirt. "You idiot," she cried. "You absolute idiot. You could have died." "But I did not," Dante whispered into her hair. "I did not." Later that night, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. Vince was in custody. His crew was in cells, and the evidence gathered from the warehouse and the restaurant was enough to put the rival gang away for life. Detective Reed stood in the alley behind La Sirena, smoking a cigarette. Dante stood opposite him, leaning against the brick wall. "You know I have enough to take you in, too," Reed said. "Obstruction of justice. RICO predicates. The warehouse." "I know," Dante said, but Reed exhaled smoke toward the sky. "You also just handed me the Corallo crime family on a silver platter, and you saved a civilian's life tonight. That counts for something. What is the offer?" "Reed?" Dante asked. Reed dropped the cigarette and crushed it. "You give me the rest of the network, the suppliers, the routes. You dismantle the machine. In exchange, you get a reduced sentence. 2 years. maybe 18 months with good behavior. And when you get out, you are out. No more crews, no more guns. Dante looked at the back door of the restaurant, where Maya was waiting for him. He thought about the fear he had lived with for 20 years. He thought about the garden Maya wanted for Eli. Deal, Dante said. 6 months later, the spring air in Riverton was sweet, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly baked bread. La Sirena was open for business. The heavy velvet curtains were gone, replaced by sheer linen that let the sunlight flood the dining room. The dark corners where deals used to be made were now filled with bright artwork and family tables. The music was still jazz, but it was lighter, upbeat. Maya stood at the host stand, reviewing the reservation list. She wore a sleek, cream-colored dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked happy, truly happy. The front door chimed. She looked up, her professional smile instantly transforming into something radiant. Dante walked in, and he looked different. The darkness that used to cling to him was gone. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, no jacket, no holster. He looked younger, lighter, like a man who had finally set down a heavy load. "Hey, stranger," Maya said, walking around the stand to meet him. "Hey yourself," Dante said. He reached out, his hand resting on her waist, pulling her in for a quick, searing kiss that made a couple at a nearby table blush. "How is the lunch rush?" "Busy," Maya laughed. "We are fully booked for tonight. Eli is coming by later to help with the inventory." Dante smiled. He ran his thumb over her cheekbone, admiring her. "Take a break," he said. "I cannot," she teased. "The owner is a real stickler for the rules." "I know the owner." Dante grinned. "I think he can be persuaded." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, and whispered the words that had started it all. "I am taking you to my room," Maya laughed, a bright, clear sound that filled the foyer. This time, there was no fear in her eyes, no gunman, no danger. "Oh, are you?" she challenged playfully. "Yes," Dante said, taking her hand, "and I am locking the door." He led her up the stairs, past the bustling dining room, to the private suite above. It was still luxurious, but the heavy gloom was gone. The windows were open, letting in the city sounds. They stopped by the window where they had stood that first night. Dante pulled her into his arms, wrapping her in his warmth. Maya rested her hands on his chest, her fingers tracing the ridge of the scar on his shoulder through the fabric of his shirt. It was a permanent reminder of the night he had almost died for her, but now it was just part of their history. Dante looked down at her, his eyes full of a fierce, steady devotion. "I love you." "Maya Collins," he said. "I love you." "Dante Rinaldi," she replied. They kissed, slow and deep, illuminated by the lights of the city that was no longer their enemy, but their home. Later, they lay on the couch, limbs tangled together, watching the sunset. "I was thinking," Dante said lazily, tracing patterns on her arm, "about that house, the one with the garden for Eli." "Yeah?" Maya asked, resting her head on his chest. "I saw a place in the suburbs. Big yard. Terrible wallpaper. But it has potential." Maya smiled, interlacing her fingers with his. She looked at their joined hands, his large and scarred, hers small and strong. They held on tight. "Let's go look at it tomorrow," she said. Dante squeezed her hand. "It's a date." The story of the mafia boss and the waitress had started with a gun and a hiding spot, but it ended here, in the quiet, in the light, with a choice to leave the darkness behind for something real. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante and Maya as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want more emotional, thrilling tales like this one, make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.